taxes at all. This was a guy who was a moderate, a centrist. And yet what we have seen since he came into office has given the lie to everything that we were led to believe during the campaign. And it started with the stimulus bill. Now look, we needed to stimulate the economy. But it caught my eye and it caught my ear when President-elect Obama, in December of 2008, even before assuming office, sent his economic team to Capitol Hill to say, we need a stimulus. Three things caught my eye and my ear. First, they only talked to Republicans, or excuse me, to Democrats. They didn't meet at all with Republicans. They sent Geithner and Summers up to Capitol Hill to say, we need a stimulus, and they didn't even bother going by the Republican leadership offices. What happened to that post-partisanship? The second thing that caught my ear was they said, look, we need a stimulus of between $650 and $750 billion, but we'll take up to $850. Now look, Congress needs adult supervision. There are three parties in Congress. There are Republicans, Democrats, and appropriators. And then guess who's in the majority? And if you say, we'll take $650 to $750, but you can go up to $850, where are they heading? They're heading for $850. And the third thing, and perhaps the most damaging thing, is that they said if that $650 to $750 or $850 if you like it, we'll describe what goes in that envelope and we'll only describe about $160 or $170 billion of what ought to go in that envelope. You figure out the rest. As Andy Card can tell you, if you don't have the President of the United States spelling out to Congress what's acceptable and not acceptable, they're going to go crazy, and they went crazy. They didn't pick out things that would stimulate the economy. They picked out every stupid spending idea that had languished in the bottom drawer of House Appropriations Committee Chairman David Obey and stuffed it into the bill. And how do we know that? We know that by how the program has rolled out. How should we judge it? How should we judge the stimulus bill? Well, I say we ought to use the words of President Obama to judge it. When he signed the bill, he said four things. He said, this bill will save or create 4 million new jobs by the end of 2010. 90% of them will be in the private sector. The money will be spent right away, and we're focusing on shovel-ready projects. Well, first of all, we've lost 2.7 million jobs since the bill was signed. We're only 6.7 million jobs below what President Obama would said he would have for us as a result of this bill. In fact, they don't even say saved or created anymore. They just say funded. Go to the recovery.org website, the official government website on this. Thank God for Al Gore creating the internet. It's a marvelous invention he made. But you go to recovery.org, and you'll find that they claim to have funded 608,124 jobs. And you look at the detail on it, and they don't add up the numbers and make it easy for you, but you'll get a very strong whiff that there's not 90% of them in the private sector. There's more like almost 90% or 80% or 70% that are government jobs. And not only that, but it's not that they're funding them, paying the salary. In some instances, they're giving them a pay raise. So let me get this right. We got some manufacturing worker up in Spartanburg, or some small businesswoman down in Charleston, or some farmer out here in the countryside outside of Columbia, and they're working harder, and they're going to be paying more in taxes and paying more in interest on the national debt to fund a $787 billion jobs bill that's giving pay raises to government bureaucrats. How stupid is that? You know, the money was going to be spent right away. The money was going to be spent right away, they said. Well, go to that same website. You have to do 3 calculations. They don't make it easy for you. And believe me, as a Texan, it was hard to work those numbers. Just 6 numbers that I had to work. 3 calculations. As of today, 40.3% of the money has been spent. We will spend more money between 2011 and 2019 to stimulate the economy in 2009 than we spent in 2009. How stupid is that? I mean, it's like the guy has a heart attack and up shows the EMS and they got the paddles there and the battery and the guy says, everybody stand clear, this is going to take a week or 2. When you stimulate the economy, you're supposed to stimulate the economy, not merely sort of take 10 years worth of spending and roll it out there. Oh, and then shovel-ready projects. Look, I'm sort of an infrastructure guy. If government's going to spend money and you spend it on a road or a bridge or a mass transit, you got a lovely road or bridge left when the government's finished. But you know, of the total $787 billion, 5% is for infrastructure, 5%. Oh, we got $5 billion in the stimulus bill for obesity counseling and smoking cessation programs. Now, I know a lot of unemployed people, but I have yet to meet an out-of-work fat coach. What the heck does that have to do with stimulating the economy? Trying to understand this all, I continually go back to a document that was issued on January 9th of 2009, 11 days before the new president comes into office. It bears the name of the incoming chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors and the chief economic advisor to that great genius, Joe Biden, Vice President of the United States. And in the document, look, Andy made me read all this stuff when I was at the White House, so I can't break the habit. There is no Betty Ford Clinic for former White House staffers. So you read this stuff, I got to go to sleep, so I got to read a government document. So I read this stuff. And I particularly read the footnotes, the charts, and the appendices. And my personal favorite in this document, which lays out the philosophical underpinnings of the Obama stimulus bill, is Appendix 1. And in there they have a nice little chart that says that for every dollar of spending under the stimulus program, there will be $1.55 in economic growth. I want you to think about that for a minute. If that's true, why did we stop at 787? We should have spent $2 trillion, had $3 trillion in economic growth, and we'd be $1 trillion to the good. We should have maybe spent $5 trillion. We get $7.5 trillion. There'd be $2.5 trillion to the good. We could throw one heck of a party with that. I mean, think about that. The mindset of these people in Washington is that they spend the money and it magically creates economic growth. Now, look, I took freshman macro. Did a heck of a lot better in it than I did in freshman accounting. The freshman macro textbooks I used said, if you have a stimulus program that's properly designed, you will be fortunate and get no more than 80 cents of economic growth for every dollar that you're spending. You're going to incur a debt that is going to have to somehow be paid at a later date because you do not get a dollar for dollar. And these guys, they think for every dollar they get $1.50. Fundamentally, they're arguing that we can spend our way to prosperity. No nation in history has tried that. Look, if that was true today, we'd be all on our way to California. Those guys would be having jobs aplenty. That'd be the really, truly golden land. You cannot spend your way to prosperity. You must save and invest and work your way to prosperity. And then I love the chart on page 5. Lovely little chart, one, sort of a little graph there. It says, these are the brains behind the economic advisors to the president. They said, look, if we pass the stimulus package, unemployment will top out at 7% by the third quarter of 2009 and decline rapidly thereafter. If we do not pass the stimulus package, unemployment will rise to 10% and will remain at nearly 10% through the first and second and potentially third quarters of 2010. Guess what? We're getting the economic performance that these geniuses told us we would get if we didn't spend the $787 billion. I mean, yeah, we're going to count on you. Just like Joe Biden yesterday said, we're going to create 250 to 500,000 jobs a month starting in June for the balance of the year. Okay, I'm waiting to see that, Joe. But even if you do, you will be between 1.7 and 3.1 million jobs less at the end of the year than you forecast. That is to say, there will be that many more people unemployed than you said would be unemployed by the end of the year. And we will, in the meantime, have added 787. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. In February, they came out and said it wasn't 787. The CBO said they made a teensy-bitsy mistake in forecasting the formulas for the stimulus bill. The actual price will be $862 billion. I guess $75 billion mistake on a $787 billion bill is good enough for government work in Washington, D.C. That's the problem. Oh, and it's made worse. It's made worse. I don't know if you caught this. President Obama came in the middle of fiscal year 09. In the middle of the fiscal year, he asked Congress to appropriate, and they approved, an 8% increase in discretionary non-security spending in the middle of the fiscal year, in the middle of the budget. They got $787 billion, but that wasn't enough. We got to go have an 8% increase in the middle of the fiscal year on discretionary non-security spending. Then he turns around and proposes the FY10 budget and gets it approved the year in which we now are, which increases discretionary non-security spending on top of that new baseline that's 8% bigger by another 12%. So if you look at it, he has increased discretionary non-security domestic spending 20